The debate over abortions for babies with Down syndrome continues to heat up. A federal judge last week put an Ohio state law prohibiting doctors from performing abortions based on a Down syndrome diagnosis on hold. This, as we've seen mainstream media advocate abortions for the unborn who have the genetic condition. The Washington Post earlier this month ran an op-ed by Ruth Marcus titled, "I would have aborted a fetus with Down syndrome. Women need that right." Representative Cathy McMorris Rodgers, who has a son with Down syndrome, responded to the article by tweeting, "When our son Cole was diagnosed with Down syndrome, my husband and I were given a long list of challenges and complications from his doctors. But when we looked at Cole, we still saw lots of potential." She continued, "There are countless people with Down syndrome who, like Cole, are changing the world." Last week, Marcus doubled down on her pro-abortion position in a new Washington Post article, writing, "While McMorris Rodgers' choice was the right one for her and her family, it would not have been the right one for me and mine." Joining us now is Representative Cathy McMorris Rodgers, the chair of the House Republican Conference. She is also co-chair of the Congressional Task Force on Down syndrome. Congresswoman, what do you think of how Ruth Marcus of the Washington Post responded to your tweets?
It was disturbing. Clearly, Ruth Marcus hasn't spent enough time with people who have Down syndrome. More than anything, I'd like to introduce her to our son Cole, who's now 10 years old, and have her meet this young kid of mine. He brings us so much joy, and I've seen the positive impact that he has on our family and everyone that he meets. And the fact that he has Down syndrome only makes me more curious as to the impact that he's going to have on this world. And I would like to share with Ruth also the outpouring of calls and letters and emails that I have had from people all across the country that have felt compelled to share their stories also of being positively impacted by someone with Down syndrome.
You have been very open about the fact your son Cole has Down syndrome. Tell us about Cole. How have you seen your son exceed expectations?
So I was 35 and single when I was elected to Congress. And so excited that I met Brian the August after I was elected, and we got married the following year, and then I became pregnant, and what a blessing that was. And then to hear the news that Cole had Down syndrome, that was tough news. He's our oldest, he's our firstborn. You have all kinds of hopes and dreams, and Down syndrome isn't on that list. And at the beginning, I remember the doctors sitting down and talking with us and walking us through a long list of complications and other difficulties that we may face or that Cole would face because he had that extra 21st chromosome. From the very beginning, Brian and I looked at Cole and saw potential. And I have seen Cole exceed all expectations. And I've learned not to put limitations on him because he's defying the odds, I guess, or maybe people just are not seeing what those with Down syndrome can really do. You know, it wasn't that long ago that someone with Down syndrome wasn't even taught to read or to learn their multiplication table because they just assumed that they couldn't. And Cole's mastered his multiplication table. He's in 5th grade, and he's the kid that other kids in his class want to have on their team because he's so good with his multiplication table. He loves sports. He loves basketball and baseball and football. And I'm even more curious as to the impact that Cole's going to have on this world.
I've heard you say having a child with Down syndrome can be tough, but just because it's tough doesn't mean it's not positive. Can you tell us more about that? And what would you want women who are pregnant with babies with Down syndrome to know?
Well, having a son with disabilities is not what you dream of. And yet, today I can testify that I am so grateful for Cole's influence on me as a mom, as a person, as a legislator. And when I say that something is tough, at times it continues to be tough, but it doesn't mean that it's not positive, that he is having an amazingly positive impact on me and the people that he meets, as well as this world. And that's what I want people to focus on. I am proud today to be a part of the disabilities community. And whenever I meet with someone who has a family member with Down syndrome, or I meet someone with Down syndrome, or someone within the disabilities community, I feel like we're family because we have in common this understanding of just because something is tough doesn't mean that it's not positive. We know firsthand how positive those with disabilities have on our families and on our communities.
We're seeing more states introduce legislation banning abortions for babies solely because of a Down syndrome diagnosis. What do you think of these state efforts?
I would support these state efforts. And I look at these efforts to protect the unborn as protecting individuals and celebrating life, no matter what that diagnosis may be.
Congresswoman, finally, this week also happens to mark World Down Syndrome Day. In your opinion, why are people with Down syndrome a necessary part of our world?
World Down Syndrome Day is just a great day to celebrate those with Down syndrome and everything that they contribute to our communities. Those with Down syndrome just want to have a chance to prove to the world what they can do and to be seen for what they can offer, to be seen for their ability. So on World Down Syndrome Day, I would encourage everyone to just take a second look. Take a second look at those that just happen to have that extra 21st chromosome and what they have to offer this world.
Congresswoman Cathy McMorris Rodgers, thank you for your time.
Good to be with you.
We continue this discussion in our studio now with our trusted pro-life expert. Marjorie Dannenfelser is president of the Susan B. Anthony List. Marjorie, glad to have you here this week.
Always good to be here.
What do you make of how GOP Chair Cathy McMorris Rodgers responded to those pieces advocating for abortion for babies with Down syndrome?
Oh yeah, well, she's in a perfect situation to talk about it. It's been her life. I knew her since she's come to Congress. We were part of her election, and when she had Cole, it was a surprise. And she, from the very beginning, said and knew that he was perfect. He was made exactly how he was supposed to be. So it added to her pro-life advocacy. It just is now an extension of her life, who she is. You know, Cole is now in the 5th grade. He's a Boy Scout. He's a big brother. She could not be more perfectly suited to do what she does in the beautiful way that she does. I'm just so proud of her for being who she is.
What message does it send when abortion groups are advocating for abortion for these babies?
Well, it is a genetic test for who lives or died, and I think that's called genocide. That's what it means. And we might be afraid of that word, but it is literally what we're talking about. So when we eliminate the disease, we're not really eliminating the disease out of like cures and clinical tests and trials and real cures. We're eliminating the people with with Down syndrome. That is genocide, and you apply it to almost any other thing that could be detected genetically, and it gets worse and worse, and it gets to be the brave new world that we do not want to live in.
We mentioned the Ohio law is put on hold right now, but where else are we seeing these non-discrimination laws across the country?
Well, it's beautiful. They're really popping up all over the place. I think people are getting inspired by other states. Indiana, Ohio, Louisiana, North Dakota, they have all passed this. And now states like Utah, Kentucky, and Pennsylvania are looking at passing this very soon. It just has a very attractive, human, you can't resist it kind of an appeal, and it is very difficult to argue against. The arguments against it sound like they are, which are harsh and calculating and exclusive.
And eugenics, which you hit on.
Yeah.
Marjorie, if there are viewers watching now and there are expectant parents and they get a prenatal diagnosis that their unborn baby is positive for Down syndrome, what would you want to share to them? What should they know?
I think they should know all of the can-dos, and not only from their doctor the what's going to be terrible. This is what happens, and it's often physicians who say they don't know any better. I think actually the truth is it is liability induced. That it's it's easier for them to just give the advice to eliminate the child because of the disease. They should hear what the prognosis is. There's an average age expectancy of 60. It used to be half that. People with Downs hold jobs. They're actors and actresses. They bring joy to the world.
That's really something for us to think about, especially as we continue to see this conversation in our nation. Marjorie Dannenfelser, president of the Susan B. Anthony List, thank you.
Thank you.